Good morning, everybody. This is my response to the Week 7 discussion question, in which we are to talk about or to speculate whether or not American foreign policy in the Middle East would have changed if Carter had been reelected. I found this a very interesting question, especially since you can see a very clear shift between Carter's foreign policy and that of the Reagan administration. Carter was very focused upon maintaining peace in the Middle East, particularly between Egypt and Israel. He recognized the fact that Egypt and Israel were the key players in the Middle East, and he recognized the fact, or he believed that if he could orchestrate a peace agreement between the two nations, that the situation in the Middle East would become less tense, and a lot of the conflict, a lot of the tension could be avoided. And that's where the Camp David agreements comes from. Reagan, on the other hand, obviously was very upfront, saying that he was not necessarily interested in making these peace agreements. He viewed the Middle East not as a separate entity, but as sort of another player in the Cold War. He believed that the issues in the Middle East were very tied in with the issues going on in the Soviet Union. So the Middle East wasn't necessarily the key focus of Reagan's policies, whereas I believe that Carter spent a lot more time focusing on the Middle East and really trying to facilitate a peace agreement between Egypt and Israel. I believe that some of the events that occurred in the Middle East during Reagan's administration were unavoidable. They were going to happen. One of them is Sadat's assassination, and Sadat's assassination may even have been spurred on by his participation in the Camp David Accord. The author of The Peace Process talks about how Sadat was gunned down by Islamist extremists who really disliked the fact that he was apparently on friendly terms with Israel, that he was willing to make a peace agreement with Israel. So, in a sense, his assassination was unavoidable. I don't think that if Carter had been reelected, that Sadat would have not been gunned down. So I don't think that's an event that would have changed had Carter been reelected. The bombing in Beirut, on the other hand, in 1983, when the Syrians attacked or bombed the military compound in Beirut and killed the 241 American service members. That, on the other hand, I don't know if that would have happened had Carter still been president. The reason why the Americans were in Beirut is because the Israelis decided to bomb the PLO headquarters in Beirut in I believe it was either 1981 or 1982. And Reagan decided to send over several thousand U.S. troops to Lebanon to defuse the situation. Reagan's decision to send these troops over goes along the lines with his more hardliner approach, his more militaristic tendencies. Carter, on the other hand, seemed to rely more heavily on negotiations, on diplomacy, rather than force. Had Carter been president, I really don't think that he would have sent these troops over to Lebanon. I think that he would have said to the Israeli leaders, to Prime Minister Begin, to the PLO, he would have said, hey, you know what, we need to figure out what's going on here. We need to get an agreement together, and we need to figure this out as feasibly as possible. Reagan, on the other hand, said, okay, if the Israelis are gonna start attacking the PLO, we need to get in there. We need to get our people in there, and we all know what happened after that. 241 service members died because of that. So the Beirut bombing, I believe, may have been avoided if Carter had still been president. The Iran-Contra affair, the scandal that happened with that, probably wouldn't have happened either, just because, as I stated earlier, Carter was very diplomatically minded, and I don't think that he would have engaged in activity like Reagan or Reagan's people did, going under the table and not letting Congress know what they were doing. I don't think that he would have sold arms to Iran in the first place, or have $30 million sent to Nicaragua. That wouldn't have happened. And as the author of The Peace Process discusses, I don't know how involved Reagan was in the scandal. I don't know if he chose not to figure out what was going on, if his people did not, kind of kept things from him and didn't let him know exactly what was going on. But I really don't think that Carter's administration would have engaged in that kind of activity. So that's another thing that probably would have been different if Carter had been president. Those are just my initial thoughts. I'm looking forward to everyone's responses.